This is the Balanced Advisor Podcast with Dr. Travis Perry, helping financial advisors like you achieve balance in their lives.
All right, we have with us today Shaun Kapusinski. He is the Director of Technology and Operations at Sequoia Financial Group. He's the founder of HIFON, a private independent study group for RIA operations professionals. He's also a co-author with Greg Friedman of the Financial Advisor M&A Guidebook, Best Practices, Tools, and Resources for Technology, Integration, and Beyond. Welcome, Shaun, to the Balanced Advisor Podcast.
Thank you, Travis. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, I would like to start off with this question for everyone that is on the show. Tell me, what is your definition of work-life balance? I know everybody has a different spin on it, so I want to know what's your flavor.
Yeah, so I'll kind of give you my one sentence definition, and maybe I can elaborate a little bit. So I would say that my definition is being able to do the things you want to do in both areas of work and personal. And certainly outside of work, we have leisure time, and we have options as to how we choose to spend that time. So in terms of being able to do the things kind of on both sides of work and then life outside of work, I'd kind of thought about that beforehand and said, if you're not achieving this ability to do what you want on both sides, then you're out of balance. So I think that kind of drove my definition, at least from the standpoint of what you had asked. To talk a little bit further about that, I would say that it's not something that comes easily at first. Whether you're doing something new for the first time, this could be starting college, this could be starting your first job, or this could be a job change. And what I mean by that, not coming easy at first, is that essentially there's a price to pay to kind of get to that balance that we all might want to enjoy. And so what I mean by that is I think that certainly when there's hard work involved in kind of figuring out what needs to be done to do a job really well, then you can see the results that you want on the work side. We're going to talk about maybe what some of the issues are, but right off the bat, those are just kind of some of my initial thoughts of what it actually is.
I like it. I like it a lot, right? Obviously plugging my own book, Achieving Balance. I mean, in the title it's all about achieving, right? And you were talking about achieving and doing those things you want to do in both areas. And so I really appreciate that. And I know that you're obviously a man of multifaceted, talented personality with technology and as an advisor. And this is kind of where I see the field going, right? More towards technology, more innovation, but having this personal flair of having an advisor kind of holding your hand through this process with the client. So you're both an advisor and you're an advisor to advisors in a sense. So you can kind of see it from both lenses. What would you say are some of the biggest issues that financial advisors face when it comes to having work-life balance or achieving it?
So I'll say to clarify, because certainly those that know me well, they know where I spend my time at our firm. So I do work for an RIA, right? So that's the advisor side that I'm connected and plugged in as a firm. And then my kind of, like you said, being an advisor to advisors, this takes more the form of HIFON, right? This is something that I had started, and it's less about consulting somebody else, and it's more about having a community where people come together and we can essentially help each other out. So with that kind of background, I'll say there's a few things that I think about that kind of are those issues to achieving the work-life balance. The first one would be trying to have it all. So if you think about the things you do at work and how much there is there, right? How much that somebody could fill their time with. You can't be in two places at once. So you can't be doing the work that you want to be doing for your clients and at the same time being present with another person, right? And engaging in conversation. Those are really on opposite ends of how you're going to be productive. It's going to be one or the other, but generally you're not going to be able to do both really well together. Another thing I think that might be an issue is trying to be somebody else. So not actually maybe accepting or feeling comfortable with, who you are. And so whether it's just ambition that somebody wants to grow, which is certainly not a bad thing, but it may not be healthy to try to maybe push that work-life balance heavier and heavier on the work side, because that's the results that somebody might want to achieve. And the last thing that I think of is that it also could be an issue, and this might be the opposite, but thinking that you might be at your peak. So this one kind of comes from something I read this year that I really like from Dan Gilbert, the psychologist from Harvard, where he talks about this end of history illusion. And the idea here is that some of the research that he and some of his colleagues did is that people kind of think that they might be where they're at right now is who they're going to be forever. And so they kind of talk about this can lead to kind of just faulty thinking and bad decision making, and may not drive someone to kind of grow into what they would ultimately like to become. So I know this is kind of the opposite of the ambitious person. This might be kind of the accepting or just thinking that I can't change. I can't get the balance. I'm stuck. And so the thinking of their psychology studies is to try to drive people to actually see themselves as how they want to be in the future, and letting that drive their decision making today. So I would say, not only do you want to not try to be somebody else, but you should be thinking a little bit more along the lines of who you'd like to become.
Love it. So in line with what we talk about, you're saying not being the same place, trying to be two places at once. It's impossible, right? We can't do that. Yet I see that a lot in productivity training, trying to be so productive that it appears that you're two places at once, and very contradictory, right, to what science teaches us about switch tasking or multitasking. It's a lie, and I'll not lie, but your deeper thought, I want to go a little bit further on this, because I'm writing the end of this book right now. I'm still editing this Achieving Balance book. And I got to a section today that talks all about motivation. And we have Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And really at the top, if you remember Maslow at all, it's in your Psych 101 books or human development, the pinnacle is to be able to have self-actualization. That is a 1940s theory that in 2010, some other psychologists challenged. And they found that actually it isn't so much about actualizing self or finding your purpose and being so creative that you get there, but it is more about leaving a legacy by being a parent and having a spouse. And so this is interesting that the thinking, being at your peak, and that's the end of it. It's kind of that self-actualization idea. But to be looking at the end of your life backwards, what I teach my clients a lot of times, is more productive in this legacy leaving approach. So I really appreciate that different thought, yet it ties right in with the approach that we take in the book. So I appreciate that. What do you see is an issue for most, other advisors? What do you see is what they actually struggle with? They can't be in two places at once. So what do they try to do? Like, they try to have it all. Like, what does that actually look like when you've been working with them? What do you notice that they struggle with the most in being productive or trying to actually achieve who they should be?
So these are kind of I don't want to say age-old questions, but they're kind of the unknown. Everyone might have an opinion. There's going to be no perfect answer. So I guess some of the first things that come to mind, I kind of referenced it earlier, I guess, when I said that you want to see results either way, or you essentially want to see results on both sides of work, right? What you're trying to accomplish in your career, but then also in life. Like you said, there are many things that we find meaning in that go beyond just the work we do to maybe provide for ourselves and others. So I think that figuring that out can be an issue, right? That can be a challenge of which do you seek first. It seems like maybe the default is that people just dive into work and they say, I'm going to spend the early years of my career or the early years of my marriage or relationship just giving it all to career, giving it all to work, and possibly making a sacrifice that is hard to know maybe at the moment if that's the right decision. It's usually after the fact, when we look back, that we maybe evaluate, and often you hear or you say to yourself, I would wish I had done something differently. So the challenge kind of starts with that, figuring out, okay, what am I going to sacrifice in terms of giving up time for work? And when you think about everything that's done outside of work, leisure time, how are you going to spend that? Are you going to build it in relationships? Are you going to do things that maybe from a leisure perspective are beneficial for yourself? And that can include everything from going for a run to just sleeping more, right? And so there is that challenge of how are you going to spend this time outside of your working hours? And does that help you achieve whatever the goals are that you would like to kind of become, as we were saying before? The last thing I think of as it relates to maybe what could be an issue, you actually referenced what I was thinking as to potentially not being satisfied or not being content. So I'm not saying that somebody should be complacent, but I do think it's important to be honest about what you really value and the importance of choosing to spend your time there, choosing to spend time on the things that you value. So again, it could be very easy to just plow through work. And I guess the last maybe comment or quote that I can reference is somebody that I worked with early in my career with Sequoia. And he said, it was again, early the first year. And I remember just having nights where you'd spend more time and sacrifice maybe a little family time in that regard. And he basically said, hey, go home. The work's going to be here tomorrow. It's always going to be here. And that to me was actually really great to have that encouragement from a colleague that was at my firm, because that showed me what the culture was. And that helped kind of build a foundation for knowing that there's going to be plenty of work and we do want to work hard and we want to figure out how to have results in the time that we're going to spend at work, but not to completely do it at the sacrifice of other things that we all end up valuing.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and you are exactly right. This is age-old wisdom. I can tell that you're mature beyond your years, and your experience in the industry has taught you maybe what to do, what not to do, and everything in between. Sounds like come really from a place of values. As you're explaining this, you talk a little bit about regrets and this idea of being content or satisfied. Do you find that in this industry that financial advisors are attracted to this industry because there's no ceiling, and therefore those who are seeking to be satisfied by financial success are lured here? Do you find it the other way around, that those who are really looking for freedom of time because they want that balance are also attracted for that reason and maybe get caught up? I'm just curious what you might elaborate on maybe the motivation for jumping into this industry might actually well be. Yeah.
So I'd say absolutely. There's that lure, you could say, to the independent RIA space. But it oftentimes, I've certainly heard folks say, I love the freedom. I love the ability to build this business to essentially not be underneath a larger company that might drive and dictate a lot of kind of what somebody has to do. So I think that freedom to some extent is a big driver. But that's, again, not being a frontline advisor working with clients. I do think that people have different motivations and it's going to be unique. Certainly, you talked about could be the allure for no ceiling in some regard, right? Building it as high or as big as somebody wants. That can be attractive. But also the time aspect is potentially having that freedom to build the business in such a way that it gets to a point where maybe somebody sacrifices growth at that point for time. And that's a choice, right? They have the ability to do that. Certainly a lot of folks end up doing that. Not everybody does that, though. A lot of times, I guess what I see more often, the people that are really engaged on the operations side, they actually get very excited about their firm continuing to grow and to push to be better.
Yeah. Now, you personally mentioned, you had that kind of breakthrough moment when you're there at night working on an evening, and your colleague mentioned, hey, go home. The work is always going to be here. How has that helped you now looking back? How has that advice helped you to have better balance?
Well, certainly it was part of our company's culture to not do that on a regular basis. Meaning, nobody was asking me or anybody else to stay late, and so there might have been my own value in seeing certain results that I chose to stick around and put the time in. It also could have been a function of the fact that this was enough years ago where the ability to work at home in a way where you might be just checking emails or studying something that's coming up the next day, you didn't have as easy of a time connecting to everything 17 years ago. So that certainly could be one of the reasons that I was in the office versus doing something like that at home, as people tend to do. But I do think that you certainly get both sides of that, where you have folks that see the balance that they've established in their life maybe before coming to a new firm, right? And this might be just based on having years in the industry and liking where they're at. And I'd say, and that's an important role to have in the firm is people that can essentially connect and relate to clients, right? There are many clients that are maybe building businesses, and you've got folks that are going to spend time with them and relate to that. And there are others that are, putting in a consistent amount of time and they're comfortable with what their goals are and what they value, and being able to spend the time doing that. I don't think that's any different for certain advisors.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of this, again, it's kind of that company culture that's expected to carry out your work, your procedures, depending on the firm that you're at. I know a lot of, this lure for a lot of advisors to leave their big BD and go independent, become an RIA, is because of that. It is because I think they're searching for that work-life balance. They're searching for a better way. Yet some still, they end up in a culture that had that idea, that lure of better work-life balance, only to find out that it's still the grind. What do you think has helped you to deal with that the most? What have you done personally to be successful to balance that, freedom of schedule with, trying to help your clients and now other advisors? Because you've got a bunch of things in the air. So tell us, what do you think has helped you personally, as the rubber meets the road to fight against that culture?
Yeah, so I'd say it's much easier to say when you're further into a career than when you're just starting out, right? So the experience, I guess, that I have is one that is a benefit of being at the firm that I've been at for this period of time. And, that is a fantastic spot for me to talk about. So not only, like I said, have others in our firm consistently kind of shared that culture with me, but that's allowed me to then kind of take that and remember the importance of how I might share that with others coming in as well. So whether it was the interns that we had coming in and learning operations years ago, to when people come in and they're new and we might be talking to them today about some of the technology we use, and really just how we kind of share with them their usage of the technology we have in place, reminding them that we want you to, yes, be accessible to the systems we have kind of anywhere at any time, but we also believe that there are certain efficiencies with processes and workflows that we've put in place that are there to make somebody more efficient and productive during the hours they're going to spend. So I'd say a lot of what I've tried to do is mimic those that have kind of, I don't want to say gone on before me because they're still with us, but that are essentially ahead, leading the charge of where our firm is going. And I'll reference again what I said before about being part of a growing firm is a very exciting thing. And there's never a shortage of things to do, but it's really cool to have a team that's very passionate, that works together, and just really enjoys having a work-life balance and showing it more than anything.
Yeah. No, you mentioned this a couple of times. So I see a pattern. Obviously, technology changed over the last 17 years, right? Undoubtedly, yeah. It's part of your book title. It's what you do to help people, and we'll get to that in a second. These best practices in utilizing technology as advisors. But man, this is where I actually see a two-edged sword. Technology that has taken over our life. I have to make sure that I've got my Apple Watch on silent theater mode and my phone shut down and turned upside down so I can't see an Amber Alert. Like, I mean, there's so many things going on, and just even have this conversation so that we can be undisrupted, no distractions, be able to have this time. And advisors, we've got news, you have clients, you have emails, you have all of these things blaring at you. Technology has almost created this space way before COVID and pandemic happened, to where you could be working at home if you wanted to. You could be a virtual advisor. I've interviewed several of them on the show. So, I mean, this is a totally different culture that you and I even began in. So what do you, as somebody who kind of specializes in some of this technology to help advisors, what would you suggest other advisors do with all that tech?
Well, I would say from my firm's perspective, we have the benefit, or at least I'd say at this point, I can look back at our years and say, there's a benefit that I'm now able to focus my time on technology. And I realize that not every firm, based on their size, based on the hats people wear, have a team or a person that can dedicate 100% of their time to the technology that firm uses. So I think I'll start first kind of in the situation I'm at, and then I'll try to address how that might be different for somebody that wears a bunch of hats. And we also say some of this stuff in the book, that you talk about what's ideal, right? And a lot of times you plan for the, you hope for the best and you plan for the worst. So from an ideal standpoint, like you said, technology is there to help people, not to hinder them, not to slow them down, not to pull them back. And I guess I'd say the most important thing that we have found at our firm, or one of the most important things that we have found, is that training people to use the technology that you have is key. And having a consistent method of training. So this is where, no matter the size of the firm, if you can have the same person or the same videos or the same documentation, whether it comes from somebody at your firm or whether it comes from, let's say, a vendor that provides training, that consistent experience is going to have a huge impact on how people use the technology that you have. And the second thing, something we've again put in place over time, kind of realizing that giving people training and then saying, good luck, go on forever and just hope you use it perfectly from now till eternity, is not really a great plan. So what we found is that you need to have ongoing, regular kind of reminder sessions. And our firm calls them office hours. So we'll spend time on a monthly basis offering a few different sessions where we have an agenda of items to just review with people and remind them. To your point, there's so many things to remember. It's very hard. And until they become habits, until they're all these little regular things that to flip over your phone, no problem, right? And to turn off your instant messaging during a recording like this, and all the things that maybe you or I might look at and say, well, we know these things because we either do them all the time or we've got a good habit of it. I try to think of, anytime we're creating new training or we have a new system, we try to think of the new hire, the new person coming in. How do you get them up to speed as fast as possible and not be too overwhelmed? They're going to be overwhelmed, but how do you get them to a point where they don't feel that overwhelmed and they can use what they need to? And so no matter the size of the firm, I think you can put both those things into place. Having a good plan for training and then having some kind of consistent, ongoing reminders about how people should be using things.
I love that. That's so timely right now. I mean, there's systems. I'm a systems guy, as you are as well. I mean, just having those systems in place, but be thinking about new technology in the back of your mind, or maybe even the forefront of your discussion, that new hire. Are they going to be overwhelmed? I had this conversation with somebody else earlier today on a live interview that, we get overwhelmed by coming brand new into this industry as advisors because there's so much to learn, so many tests to take, so much of that then culture, depending on where you come into a big broker dealer, you come into a small, firm, whatever it is, you've got to learn that culture, learn that sales technique, the advising role that you're in. And so there's a lot to be trained on. It's so much is information overload these days that I think some people just check out and they end up checking email. They want to do something else as an excuse, or they're on social media because they need a stress reliever and they don't know how to do that in a healthy way. So I appreciate what you're bringing here. And I know we could probably spend a ton of time just talking about this technology, but this brings us to our next point is, how do you help advisors with technology, with systems? How do you help them? What does HIFON actually do to help advisors to have work-life balance?
Yeah, so I'll talk about it from both perspectives. So being at the RAA and being on the tech team, it is about driving not only a great client experience, but also putting each member, each person, each teammate of mine, putting them in a position so that they can accomplish what their objectives are. And we certainly believe as a firm that having the best technology is going to help make the lives easier in terms of what they're trying to do to accomplish their objectives, which ultimately includes making our clients successful at reaching their goals. So it's very connected in that regard. At HIFON, it's about providing a community. So the idea that I originally had of just having a study group that I could tap into, certainly I tell people it's a selfish endeavor at first, right? Is I want to organize something so that I can learn, so I can get better. I kind of acknowledge the fact that there was so much more that I needed to tap into. And knowing that pretty much every firm out there that operates in this space is going to have somebody or a group of people that understand the operations, know the challenges, and face similar issues. So to be able to go to a group and ask questions and listen, and then when they ask questions, help them out, that has been a huge kind of passion of mine, to be able to help people succeed, right? I kind of took my original interest. I want to succeed in my job, and I want my company to grow, and I want us to see results. I think if I tap into what the industry provides, not just what I think I can come up with, especially when a firm is small, there's usually not a lot of people that are in the operations area. So you might have 1, 2, 3 people or less, that you can interact with, at least as it relates to all the things that you're trying to do. As a firm gets bigger, maybe that's a little bit easier, but when you're a little smaller, at least at the point where we started, having single digit or initially just into double digits of employees at the firm, you need to hear from others if you're really going to kind of accelerate your learning. So I think that we can continue to have a group like HIFON that ultimately helps advisors, because their ops people are really learning how to use technology the best and work through the challenges that they're facing. We all kind of acknowledge we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're trying to help each other the same way that any other kind of community type group gets together and basically says, hey, we're here for you. We support you. We know what you're going through. And here's some suggestions of what you can do. So there's definitely this domino effect of it starting kind of with these behind the scenes back office conversations, and that leading to what somebody can do, the change that they can affect inside their firm. And then ultimately that's going to hit the advisors, their lives, and how they spend time with clients.
That's great. That's great. You talked about, obviously you guys aren't reinventing the wheel, but you're providing a space for people to be supported, to have suggestions, to move them in their ops, in their own firm. So what does that look like if I was to go? Is it a physical space? Is it an online connection? Is it a hybrid of both?
Yeah. So from the beginning, interestingly, we have been a virtual group. So from 10 years ago when we started it, it was a phone call that ultimately turned into a Zoom call, and that's what we were doing for a handful of years. We added a discussion board, so there are definitely members that spend, their go-to once a month is the call, but on a daily basis, kind of any time. I originally was thinking about people that went to conferences and then those that couldn't go to conferences, and so that there's however many. 10,000, 15,000 independent advisory firms, if not more, depending on the size. And you go to these conferences and you see a few thousand people or a few hundred people sometimes. And then even then, most of them are advisors. So there was less and less kind of, at least that I recognized, that was for ops people. But knowing that all these firms have these people that are most likely back in the office, continuing to do kind of their daily grind work, those people want that same connection, that same community. They may not have the CE requirements that an advisor has, but I'd say you want them to have that interest in their own education. And so we've tried to provide a community and even bringing in outsiders to educate us on some of the things that they're seeing. So very much, kind of a collaborative effort between a lot of ops people who come together and are willing to give, not just take from the group.
Yeah, that's really good. That's, the idea of working together and helping each other. Because you're right. I mean, if I didn't really think about this before coming to this podcast today, but thinking about the typical personality traits of an ops person, an advisor comes in and they're typically the extroverted for the majority, right? A financial advisor who wants to be client facing, and you've got the ops person more introverted who wants to be more, firm facing and help and support on the back end. Yet how many conferences are for the ops people? What kind of support is that? I haven't ever really seen it from that point. I've selfishly been looking at, well, what's there on the, practice management side. And I can see how having an ops person and having that training in place for your firm kind of connects the dots between financial advisors who struggle, right, with back office related issues that may actually be detrimental to their work-life balance. 2014 FBA put out a study about work-life balance and found that, number one was emails that kept them from keeping balance and managing their time. And number two was all the paperwork, right? Paperwork, now it's online and electronic, because most likely don't have really good systems, or they don't have, processes in place. And those ops personnel could be instrumental in helping that. I think that there's a lot of overlap where you and I work on this. So I'm excited to be able to have this connection with you today and get to know a little bit more about you. Our advisors, our ops people that are listening that want to have access to learn more about you. Obviously they can get your book, right? So go get Shaun's book. It's available, the Financial Advisor M&A Guidebook that's out there, that he and Greg Friedman wrote. But then tell us a little bit about how people can find you right now, Shaun.
Sure. So obviously I'm out on LinkedIn, and our website for HIFON is HIFON.org. So the HIFON website is where people can go to just kind of understand what we do. But certainly if you've listened to this, you got a good feel for it. And we do offer a 30-day trial. So that's a great way for someone to just kind of dip their toes in the water and get a feel for it. And then from there, they can decide if they like to join us. Very
good. So I'll have that link, below here as we're listening. You guys can go to hyphen.org, get that 30-day free membership availability. Obviously, that's kind of what's expected in the tech world these days, a 14-day, a 30-day trial. What do they expect in that 30 days? Is it the same kind of value they would get as if they were a full-fledged member?
So I'll say it's certainly limited in the sense that we don't add them to groups for the regular calls, but and we don't release certain data that we share. We have a templates and shared documents area that, again, it's kind of behind the wall. So we certainly share what's available and give them a feel for what calls are like. We have some recorded calls that they can listen into, but the discussion board is actually the part where they kind of are the most wide open to interact and listen on one hand, but also to participate so they can get a feel for what that's like. I almost always offer a conversation. So to me, that's something that sometimes people go through that and they're fully comfortable and they move forward. Other times they say, I just want to talk to somebody. So I'm more than happy to do that. And that generally has kind of calmed fears where people say, okay, there's a person behind us. I understand there's a team that's supporting this. And, that makes things a little bit easier on some people's decisions.
Good. Very good. Well, it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for being able to share so much knowledge and information, and quite honestly, being able to hear and bounce ideas off of you about work-life balance is refreshing. There's people out there that have very similar ideas who are working hard to improve the lives of advisors, helping them with their balance, helping them to improve their firms. So thank you for making time to be on the Balanced Advisor podcast.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for the invitation.